Test 1, 2, 3, 4. Say hi. That's good. Test 1, 2, 3, 4.
We are here.
Sarah,
We are here,
I think
yes.
Sarah's on her way down, Vince.
We are here, Vince.
Okay.
Vince, can you hear us?
We can hear you, Mr. Vince.
Vince, can you
Okay.
hear? Can
Just
you
want to make
hear?
sure she has my number.
Okay, you can't hear us. Vince.
Try now.
Vince?
Yes?
Okay, you can hear us. We have you on, and we are just waiting for a couple more people, and we'll let you know when we have everyone on. Chair McLaughlin?
I'm here.
So, just so you know, Commissioner Garcia did mention that she may just be a few minutes late, but we still will have quorum, if you want to start without her. But, I'm just gonna take a look at the list that we have going here to see, how many more people we need to join, if you can just hold for a minute or so.
I'm here. That's fine.
Can you give me my blue and my drink? Thank you.
One last thing, please. Thank you.
Hi, Marge. How are you?
190.
I'm good.
Commissioners, if you have the last three numbers of 190 in your phone number, can you please identify yourself? Last three digits, 190. Or a staff member, does anyone calling in with the last three numbers 190?
They were muted.
Oh, are they muted now?
It's Commissioner Rivera.
Oh, Commissioner Rivera. Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and notate that on our end so we have, and that's your permanent or your cell phone number, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so we'll make that note. Thanks, Commissioner Rivera. In just one moment, we're going down the list. Okay, Commissioners, we do have everyone that we are expecting as of now, and like I mentioned, Commissioner Garcia will be just a few minutes late. So, Chair, we do have quorum if you'd like to begin the meeting.
That would be fine. Okay, since we're going to start, Madam Secretary, would you please start to record the meeting?
Yes. We are now, are we now broadcasting, Tom?
YouTube is going.
Okay, yeah.
Well, not Zoom.
Not Zoom.
Yeah, no, but
Okay.
not on mics.
I'm sorry?
We went live on Zoom, we need to turn on mics.
On our mics. Okay. Everyone have their mics. All right, Chair, we are live on YouTube and Zoom, so we're ready to begin.
Okay. I would like to call this regular Planning Commission meeting of June 22nd, 2020 to order. Madam Secretary, would you lead us to the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. Please stand and place your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to
I
the
pledge
flag
allegiance to the flag
States of America,
Of the United States of America,
America,
republic
and
for
to the
which it
republic
stands,
which stands
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
with
indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, would you call roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Garcia, she will be a few minutes late, so I'll note that here. Commissioner Nguyen. Commissioner Nguyen. Okay, Ken is not on yet. And then I just was informed Commissioner Garcia.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Commissioner Nguyen.
Ken, we can hear you. Okay.
Okay, we got you
Okay.
on. So I have Commissioner Nguyen, Commissioner Garcia.
Here.
Thank
Here.
you. Okay. Commissioner Fan,
Here.
Commissioner Rivera,
Here.
Vice Chair Contreras Leo,
Here.
Chair McLaughlin.
Here.
Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you. I'd just like to verify one thing. Commissioner Cano is not on the planning commission at this point in time, correct?
Yes, that is correct. The Ward 6 position is currently vacant.
Okay, just wanted to check and see because we had her name on the list. So with that, we have 6 commissioners this evening. I'd like to invite the planning commission secretary to describe the way the public can access this virtual meeting.
Thank you. This meeting is being live streamed via YouTube at www.youtube.com/cityofsantaanavideo/live and to our website www.santa-ana.org/cc/city-meetings. While the meeting is in progress, the public may provide a comment by phone. To comment by phone, please dial 1-669-900-9128. Enter meeting ID 315965-149, followed by the pound sign. When prompted for a participant ID, please enter pound. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, please dial *9. When the comment period is open, I will call on you by the last 3 numbers listed on the caller ID. When you are called on, please state your name, your position on the matter, and your comment. You will have 3 minutes. I will alert you when your time is up. And that
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Moving on to public comments on non-agenda items. Madam Secretary, does anyone wish to speak at this time on a non-agenda item?
If there are any callers that would like to speak on a non-agenda item, please dial *9 now. We'll wait a couple of seconds to see if we have anyone. We don't have anyone that would like to comment on a non-agenda item.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We will then close the public comment section and move on to the consent calendar. I'd like to have a motion to have the Planning Commission meeting minutes of May 26th, 2020 approved. Can I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, so Felix. Okay, Felix is the so moved, and second is Cynthia. Thank you. Madam Secretary, will you do a roll vote, please?
Yes, Commissioner Garcia,
Here.
Commissioner Nguyen,
Yeah.
Commissioner Rivera,
Aye.
Commissioner Fan,
Yes.
Vice Chair Contreras Leo,
Aye.
and Chair McLaughlin.
Aye.
Motion passes by unanimous vote.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We are now going to move to the work study calendar. Moving on to the work study calendar, please note that there will be no motion or action taken on these items. The item on the work study calendar is to review the proposed billboard ordinance. Ali, I assume you're presenting this evening?
Chairman, tonight's presentation will be led by Jerry Guevara, and both of us will be here to answer any questions and take your feedback.
Okay, then if you're ready, Gary, please go ahead and start the presentation.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. This is a work study session on an update to the city's off-premise advertising ordinance, or otherwise known as billboard ordinance. Moving on to slide number 4. The purpose and the goals for this update is to, 1, modernize the existing ordinance. The existing ordinance was last updated in 1987, and it's outdated, doesn't currently reflect current conditions in terms of market conditions, and it also is to be able to generate some revenue for the city. 2, to eliminate non-conforming billboards from the city. In particular, staff is looking to remove those that are located on residential properties or property zoned for residential purposes. In addition, it is to construct or to allow the construction of new digital display billboards, and also to allow the conversion of existing static billboards to digital billboards. Moving on to slide number 5. With that, new billboards would only be located along the major freeways in the city, which is the 5, the 55, and the 22 freeway. For example, in addition to that, staff is developing a standard criteria that these billboards will be subject to. For example, these billboards would not be allowed to be located on non-residential properties, will be subject to a 300-foot separation to residential uses. They will also have to be within the 300-foot adjacent or within the 300-foot right-of-way of the freeways. In addition to that, these billboards will be subject to Caltrans requirements. They will have to submit an application to Caltrans. For example, one of the criteria for Caltrans is that these billboards need to be at least 1,000 feet from each other in terms of them being digital. Moving on to slide number 6. So based on the criteria that I just highlighted, this here is basically an aerial map of the city that kind of highlights 4 major areas, which is being highlighted in yellow, that pretty much display the areas that billboards will be allowed. And these areas are further evaluated and will be presented here as areas 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and 6. Bless you. Moving on to slide number 7. So this is, sorry, skip the slide. All right, so moving on to slide number 7, this is pretty much a area number 1, which will be where potential billboards will be allowed. And the area that we are looking at is pretty much the oval area that's highlighted in yellow, which is an area pretty much that borders the 22 freeway and Grand Avenue. Moving on to slide number 8. This is area 2, which shows again the potential areas where billboards will be allowed. And again, it's highlighted in yellow. And this area is along the 5 freeway between Main Place Mall and the French Park Neighborhood Association district boundaries. And we're moving now to slide number 9. And this is a aerial of area number 3, which shows again the potential billboard areas along the 5 freeway between Santa Ana Boulevard and 1st Street, or the Santa Ana Zoo. Moving on to slide number 10. This is area number 4, which shows potential billboard areas along the 55 freeway between Edinger Avenue and Warner Avenue. Moving on to slide number 11. This is area 5, which shows again potential billboard areas that are going to be allowed along the 55 freeway between Alton Avenue and Sunflower Avenue. Correction, that was area number 5, which is along Warner Avenue and Alton Street. Now moving on to slide number 12. This is the last area, which is area 6, which shows again the potential areas for billboards highlighted in yellow, which will be allowed along the 55 between Alton Avenue and Sunflower Avenue, which is pretty much the south boundary of the city, which borders the city of Costa Mesa and Irvine. And then we are now moving to slide number 13. So in terms of the reviewing process and permitting process for what is being proposed, we've created this table that highlights the different review process and the body that will be authorized in terms of approving billboards. So for new billboards, again, this is not for conversions. For new billboards, an applicant will have to first submit a development project review application, which is then reviewed by the city's Development Review Committee, which encompasses multiple agencies such as Public Works, Building, Orange County Fire Authority. So that process will be reviewed administratively, and it will be subject to planning manager's approval or the director of planning and building agency. In addition to that, new billboards will also be subject to a operating agreement, which will be authorized and approved by the city manager's office. And lastly, new billboards will also be subject to a conditional use permit, which will require approval of this body or by the city council if appealed. And now moving on to conversion of existing off-premise advertisement. So again, these are existing static billboards that will be allowed to be converted into digital. Those particular billboards will be subject to a different administrative process. Staff is proposing that they also go through the development review project process. In addition, they will also be required to obtain an operating agreement. However, those billboards will not be subject to a conditional use permit. And that is in order to somewhat streamline the review process for those already existing static billboards. And then lastly, the third category is for billboards for static monument signs or pole signs that are currently only advertising on-premise advertisements. On-premise advertisements refers to signs or advertisements for businesses displaying or advertising products that are currently sold on their property. Those particular billboards will be allowed to convert or be allowed to transition or be reconstructed to digital billboards subject to a development project review, operating agreement, and again, they will also be subject to a conditional use permit. And then I'll go ahead and move on to slide number 14, and then if the commission has questions with regards to this, we could go ahead and answer those questions afterwards. So in addition to meeting the development standards or the criteria as explained, staff is also analyzing exchange ratios. So in order for an applicant to be able to construct a new billboard or to be allowed to convert an existing static billboards, they will have to either A, remove non-conforming billboards, and again, this ratio right now is still being analyzed. Staff is going back and forth in terms of whether requiring the removal of 6 billboards or requiring a percentage in terms of square footage to be removed. In addition to that, staff is also looking to allow the flexibility for some of these property owners that do have current on-premise advertisements that are wishing to convert into digital to be allowed to proceed without this racial requirement. However, they will be subject to some form of economic community benefits. So again, they will have either option A or B. In terms of the community and economic benefits, staff is pretty much looking at a list of requirements. For example, such applicants will be subject to or will be required to be a local business with regional attraction. They will have to provide defined annual taxes sales. And again, those numbers are still being discussed by staff. In addition, they will be subject to some form of either on-site or off-site improvements. This could be improvements to the sidewalks or improvements to an existing park. In addition to that, we're also looking for them to be able to demonstrate ongoing business plan to ensure that they will continue to provide business to the city as well as to generate revenue for the city. And lastly, we are encouraging that they are local employers for the city of Santa Ana's residents as well as show significant employment. With that, moving on to slide number 16. So in addition to the requirements as mentioned earlier, some additional requirements which are pretty much standard would be they will have to be subject to some design guidelines or design standards, and including height and size of the billboard. There will be some requirements in terms of lighting and illumination, as well as screening and landscaping requirements. And then through the operating agreement, we are looking at maintenance requirements to ensure that the billboard as well as the adjacent area is maintained at all times. And lastly, we are looking to require some form of public service announcements to be displayed on these billboards. With that, that concludes staff presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. Last slide. In terms of next steps, where we're at in the process, we are currently, as mentioned, still drafting the ordinance, and we are in the process of finalizing the mitigated declaration that's required as part of the California Environmental Quality Act. In addition to that, we are going to be conducting some formal outreach to the industry and as well as different stakeholders. And then we are planning on bringing back this item as a public hearing to the Planning Commission sometime in July or August. Following that, the City Council will also have to review this ordinance and approve it. With that, that concludes staff presentation. We're here to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Do any of the commissioners have a question of staff? Commissioner Garcia?
Yes, thank you. I do. My first question is, what are the projected revenues, annual revenues from this project, proposed project?
Commissioner Garcia, can you repeat your question? Sorry.
Yes, and let me know if you have trouble hearing me else. What are the projected annual revenues for this proposed project?
Commissioner Garcia, this is Mintai. At this point in time, we don't have a projected number in terms of the revenue that's being proposed. What we are looking at is a structure to where we do each billboard at its location because of particular location and details that we don't have right now. It could generate different revenue at different locations. So we are looking at a structure to where we can tailor through the operating agreement, reviewing the performance of each location and evaluate the ability to participate at that point in time.
Okay. One of the first points that I heard was that one of the goals would be to increase revenue to the city. And so my question is, have we considered, what that range looks like? I just want to have a good sense of what we're really talking about here in terms of revenue, and then I have other questions as well. So
we can certainly provide
what
more
that looks like?
Yes, we can certainly provide more detail once we have formulated some type of structure and at least give you some estimate for the purpose of just being able to understand the order of magnitude. And we will do that when we bring this back for public hearing at that time. We can do that.
So right now you don't have any sense of what that could look like or what that range would be?
Based on my experience, it could range anywhere between, depending on the location, $30,000 to $200,000+ per year to the city. That is a range.
Right.
So that's per location.
And can you define per location for me?
Meaning that each billboard, each electronic billboard, because we are proposing billboards to be located along the freeway corridor, and based on Caltrans limitation in terms of the distance requirement, there will be an absolute limited number of billboards that can be available along those corridors. So
when you say per location, you don't mean per quarter, you mean actual billboard.
For actual billboard, correct.
So just jumping in on that one, if you look at Main Place, and Main Place has 5 billboards. So that would be 5 times whatever your dollar value is, correct?
It could potentially be that, correct. And when I say 30 to 2, you're right, it is per single location, each billboard.
Okay. Do we have an overlay of, you have slide 6 through, I don't know, I think 13 or 12 with the potential new locations, the corridors. Do we have a map that shows where you have existing billboards right now? Like what that would look like? So that we can compare the before and after, because we have all these digitized billboards all over the city.
Commissioner Garcia, we do have a current map of the city in terms of where these billboards are located. But just to kind of give you a background in terms of the current ordinance, it does allow it through mostly citywide, with the exception of some areas. So the intent is, if this ordinance gets approved, some of the inner city billboards or those located on residential properties will be eliminated. But again, that map we could provide to you as part of the package staff report for the public hearing. And then in terms of
That was actually, go ahead.
And in terms of the number of billboards that would be allowed along these freeways is still pending. Obviously, they are subject to Caltrans requirements. Right now, I believe we only have about 6 billboards adjacent to these freeways, and the majority of them are static billboards, which are subject to different requirements. So depending whether or not those get converted, then the spacing will be a little bit different. But in terms of the analysis of how many billboards are projected, we could have that analysis provided to you during the public hearing process.
And you did also answer my next question, which is what would happen to the citywide billboards, so thank you for that. In terms of the spacing, do you have a sense of what that spacing actually looks like? And I'm sorry, I'm just picturing driving down the 55 and having, you know, a ton of digitized billboards, and I'm not sure how I feel about that look, so getting a picture of that would be helpful.
So just going back to the aerials that were provided, the areas that were highlighted in yellow are just somewhat areas that would allow potential billboards. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have an analysis that provides more or less a more confined area where billboards will be allowed, but we could get those projections. Last time we spoke to our consultant, who's also who's preparing this ordinance for us, they did give us a ballpark in terms of how many billboards can be potentially constructed, and I believe it was anywhere between 10 to maybe 15. But that would be throughout the 55, the 5, and the 22.
10 to what? I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that last one number.
10 to about, I want to say 15 billboards, but that they will be spread out throughout the 55, the 5, and the 22 freeway.
Chairman? You're basically proposing that there would be a limit of 10 to 15 billboards throughout this process.
Those are the projections, Chairman. We're not trying to specify a particular number as indicated, depending on where they're located and the minimum requirement that they need to be 1,000 feet away from each other. The number might be a little bit different.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Sorry,
Cynthia.
Yes, Cynthia, go ahead.
So I agree with my colleague, Ms. Garcia. My concern is I would not like our city to start to look cheapened along the freeways. And number 2, do we have something comparable that we can picture? Another city where it has several arteries that run through it that we can compare this to? That's already existing with the amount of billboards you're foreseeing?
In terms of comparison, we did analyze other cities' billboard ordinance. For example, the city of Tustin just recently updated their ordinance to allow for freeway adjacent billboards, maybe like 2 or 3 months ago. Obviously, the city of Tustin does have less frontage or along freeways, major freeways like the city of Santa Ana does. But just to give you a comparison, the only other city that I could think of is the city of Carson. They've actually been somewhat, in the past couple of years, aggressive in terms of allowing new ones. So if you drive along the 405 by their old StubHub Center, more or less, that kind of gives you an idea.
Now, is this something that we're advertising that it's available, or is it just there as people need to apply for these?
Commissioner, this is Ali speaking. So this is not being advertised yet because it's still in the draft format. There's no ordinance, there's no environmental document out yet for this. So the purpose of tonight's session with the Planning Commission is to get initial feedback, which you're providing, and then also answer your questions. But it is not being advertised as available. There's no permits available, no applications.
Well, no, but see, that's my question is, once all of this is done, and you've gotten the recommendations and city council has approved or otherwise, is it something that's if the plan is to advertise it as something people can have, or is it being reserved for when folks request them, and then once we reach our max, are we done?
So to answer that question, Commissioner, it is a finite number based on the various corridors that we have, because of the limited, travel distance between the corridors in the city. There'll be a finite number of billboards. We intend, once we complete the process, and if the city council approves the ordinance, we would be working with economic development to send the information out to the industry. Obviously, we are currently also involving the industry, and will involve the industry during the outreach, that they're aware of what the city is looking at, and I'm sure they'll keep very close eyes on the process. So the answer to you is yes, we intend to inform the industry the result of this process.
And why are we looking to change it? I know that when billboards have come up, they've come across us or to city council, and they've been taken on a case-by-case basis. Is it just to try to create revenue, or is there a dual purpose? Why?
It's a combination of strategy, coupling a goal of potentially looking at reducing internal billboards that are in the city centers and areas that are not adjacent to freeway corridors. Our goal is to look at consolidating and removing some of that in exchange for freeway frontage and visibility. As you know, the industry has turned from static billboards going to digital billboards, which provides quite a different opportunity for the companies, not only in terms of maintenance, but also the ability for them to work remotely to maintain the advertisement, but also to adjust the lighting. The LED technology has advanced so much that it's a lot crisper, both in the daytime and nighttime, while having the ability to emit controllable light levels during dusk, dawn, or at night. And all that can be done real time, remotely. So you don't have issues of maintenance that you would with a static billboard. It also provides the city with an opportunity for revenue sharing with the companies. This is not new. Many cities have taken that model and have used that model to not only provide public messaging for CSAs, but also to be a part of the revenue generation process, and using that revenue then to bring back and flow back into the community for benefits. So those are some of the impetus of staff having been worked on this billboard process, I believe, over 2 years now, and it culminated in terms of the research and what we feel we would be able to bring at least back and recommend a positive program to the Planning Commission and City Council for consideration for all cities.
And I think
Mr. Chairman?
I think in the past
Yes, go
this
ahead.
has been something that we have probably asked for, and I appreciate the slide, but it gives us no background as to why we're here today. And I think some of us could appreciate then making the decision or visualizing this, because none of that information is here. So that's just the point I'd like to make. Thank you, Chairman.
Understood.
Mr. Chairman, Ken, yes, go ahead, Ken.
Okay. I do like the idea of digital or electronic billboard to be installed along our freeway in our city, because this billboard we're promoting the Santa Ana businesses, as well as also can serving as the public service announcement in case of alert or emergency for the city and so on throughout the city system. And also the idea of the revenue sharing, of revenue from coming from advertising on this billboard could be beneficial for the city. But I do have two questions though. Number one, I would like, is this billboard that will be installed by private companies and management by private company or by the city? The first question, and the second question is this billboard will be installed over the freeway or along the freeway?
Commissioner, thank you for your questions. For the first question about whether these are going to be city constructed or not, the ordinance will be set up to open it up to private billboard companies to construct these structures, be it individual property owners in Santa Ana or billboard companies constructing those on private property or potentially city-owned properties. And then the second question or answer to your question about location, the plan is to construct these along the or set up an ordinance to allow construction of these along the freeways, not over the freeways, or not like the Amber Alert emergency electronic message displays that you see on the lanes. These would be the traditional billboards that you would see, driving in other cities.
I do support been on the information on the technology. Technology now, the LED technology have improved tremendously and able to use as a video imaging. So I think if the digital billboard, I think we should have the clause on it that will the private company that install and operate this billboard will allow the city a certain fragment or time period we can able to use as a PSA in case of alert, emergency, or something like that. I think it would be an ideal situation. That's the Mr. Chairman.
Mark, I have a follow-up question about it.
Is this Norma?
Norma, it is.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank
What I'd like to do is finish your question, and then what I'd like to do is just move to the other commissioners to at least get some feedback from them. And then anybody that wants to come back a second time will be glad to do that. So go ahead, Norma.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm the 10 to 15 billboards, would it be per corridor or in total?
Commissioner, this is Ali. The estimated amount is 15 to 20 total along all the freeways in Santa Ana, not just per corridor.
So we're not going to have like 50, so that's not the plan.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Fan.
Hi, yes. First, thank you, staff, for your presentation. I do have to echo one of the other commissioners. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear who it was, but a kind of background would be great. I ended up going to the city's municipal code to look up our current ordinance, or excuse me, code sections regarding this, and my question is more regarding this new piece, and if you can just clarify for me, because on slide 13, it shows that we need CUP for conversions of on-premise and new billboards, but not for off-premise. Is there a reason for that?
Correct, yes. So thank you, Commissioner. The idea behind the draft ordinance would be to allow reconstruction of the existing static billboards into new structures with digital displays through a ministerial process that would be more efficient, to allow these structures to basically be reconstructed, beautified, and converted to digital technology, subject to code standards that would be codified in the new ordinance. Whereas any new structure would then be evaluated through the CUP process, which would give the opportunity to place conditions on the structures and also ensure that a thorough analysis, of the new location, of the dimensions, the scope, all that of the new structure would be afforded to staff and the Planning Commission. So it's basically a matter of distinguishing between existing structures being reconstructed and refurbished more or less the same size and scale, just with digital technology, versus brand new structures that would warrant a more higher level of scrutiny.
So that makes sense to me, but why is it that on-premise conversions also require CUP when the off-premise conversions do not?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh. So on slide 13, so for new billboards, that makes total sense that we need a CUP. Conversion of off-premise, as you explained, does not require CUP due to the fact that we want to have a ministerial process with a very clearly delineated requirements. And we have conversion of on-premise advertising, and that also requires a CUP. So I guess I'm just trying to understand why they're different, conversion of on-premise and off-premise, or is that just a conversation for another time?
The original, and thank you for clarifying, the original ideology was that the conversion of these existing digital on-premise signs to advertise off-premise would be subject to a CUP to give the city and the Planning Commission an added level of ability to condition these existing displays to feature more advertising of the on-site products being currently advertised, to really highlight and advertise products here in Santa Ana. Like, let's say if a certain site with an existing display, were to convert to off-premise, the CUP would give the city, for example, an opportunity to condition that site would have to continue to advertise the products and services sold at that location. These are homegrown products. These are products, available for sale in Santa Ana, and give that ability, as one avenue through a condition of approval. But certainly,
Okay.
one of the goals of this study session is to continue to get feedback and ideas from the commission on these topics.
Okay, understood. I think I just... Oh, go ahead.
This is Min, and to add to Ali's explanation on the rationale, the idea is that the existing on-premise advertising, did not go through the process that the static one conversion did in terms of approval. So some of the original considered for off-premise conditions may not have been put into place. So we would consider the on-premise advertising conversion as as very similar to establishing a new sign, even though the technology may be the same, but it's establishment of the new off-premise sign.
Okay, oh, that makes sense. I appreciate that clarification. I think that's all I have for now. And come
Hey,
back to me.
Commissioner Rivera. Commissioner Rivera, do you have any questions?
No question, just a comment as far as some of the stuff that Commissioner Contreras was saying. Yeah, it would be good to have some background and some information as far as where this is coming from. But I also agree with updating some of this stuff to get this new technology, so like the digital tech, to be able to put up these billboards with nicer technology or things along those lines. And even considering what we could do about being able to have the city have some type of access to be able to use them for whatever reason. I mean, we kind of never know in what capacity, but some type of access. But yeah, those are my own comments right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Rivera. Vice Chair Contreras Leo, any questions?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. I've got, hang on, guys. That's my wife's phone that just went off behind me. I apologize. It wasn't your presentation, Allie.
Thanks for clarifying.
Okay. Yeah. Here it is, Allie. I got 20 questions for you. First of all, for this presentation, I guess moving forward, I think, I was around when this whole billboard discussion started, when we had Tom's Trucks come in wanting to put a billboard in. And then afterwards, after that, we had the Main Place Mall put in their signage. If we're looking at standards and we're looking at the differences between the two installations, where do we think the standard is going to be at this point in time? I mean, we had some pretty simple guidelines with height, width, and everything else. So how is that? Is there a way of getting a draft of what the design guidelines are going to be at this point in time for a project like this?
Yes. So as part of the mitigated negative declaration that'll be circulated, the draft ordinance, the main points and all that will be also available for public review, posted to our website, and can be distributed, of course, to the Planning Commission as well.
Okay, and I'd like to see that. I would like to see that well before we get into the actual meeting that's going to be held to review this and everything else. The other thing is that we wrestled with PSA, and with respect to PSA, I think Tom's Trucks, we gave them a stipulation relative to 6 minutes per hour, or 10% was supposed to be PSA. What's been introduced in this discussion and has already been shown in the Main Place Mall is that there's off-premise advertising that's being done at Main Place Mall. Tom's Trucks doesn't really do off-premise. They either do their own business model or they do the PSA. So we are going to have off-premise type advertising that will also be on these billboards.
So if a site that currently has a digital on-premise sign like Tom's Trucks or Main Place Mall is under the new ordinance allowed to convert to do off-site, then yes, they would, subject to review and approval of a CUP, which is what's currently proposed, they would be allowed to advertise off-site products. But that's if the site is in an eligible area per the new ordinance.
Because, one of the issues I've heard that Caltrans has with the Angel Stadium and the Duck Pond is that both of those are doing third-party advertising, and that was not part of their agreement. And so I think that that's something, if we're going to do that, I'm assuming that we're going to have agreement from Caltrans on that specific thing being available for off-premise advertising.
That's correct. Any permit that the city would entertain at the local level would still have to get Caltrans authorization for offsite advertising.
And one of the other things I noted in the presentation, it basically said something around 300 feet from a residential area. You know, quite frankly, I think the city has had a significant amount of feedback from the people that live in Morrison Park and Park Santiago and Fisher Park. I mean, I could look out my backyard and see the billboard sign at Main Place Mall because it's bright and it glows at night. And so, you know, it doesn't necessarily impact our quality of life, but as you get closer to the 5, it does. And that's clearly over 300 feet, maybe even further, just to go across the 5 to get from where the billboard sign is to the neighborhood. So I'm not sure that 300 feet is a very good number at this point in time if we're looking at residential locations.
Thank you, Chairman. We took that down as a note.
Okay. And then the other thing that was done with respect to Tom's trucks is we had them with a time period to which they could put the signs, the billboard signs out. And there were 2 factors. One was, in the case of Tom's trucks, they were 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning. I don't remember exactly, but it's one of those 2 times. And it was 10 p.m. that the sign went off. Now, that's not the same case for Main Place Mall. It appears that they're 24/7.
That is correct. So the just to provide some background to the commission, the Tom's Trucks and Main Place and a handful of the other digital signs that are found along Santa Ana's freeways are subject to a different ordinance. Section 41885 of the Santa Ana Municipal Code is for regional plan sign programs. And that ordinance does not have, as the chairman's indicating, any hours of operation requirements. So noted, Chairman. Thank you.
And when you talk about, just as you were talking about the program, signage program, you know, we just had a recent discussion in the Planning Commission with respect to the signage that was on the sides of the Discovery Cube. Does this new ordinance impact that in any way?
I'm sorry, were you asking if this new ordinance would affect the Discovery Science Center?
Yeah, it was my understanding that when the Discovery signage was brought up in front of the Planning Commission, that you know, it was basically going to be grandfathered in under the current ordinance. Now, with this new ordinance, is there going to be any impact to the signage on the Discovery Cube?
No. So to answer your question directly, no, there would be no direct impact unless Discovery Science Center were to apply for a permit that if this ordinance, let's say, were approved, you know, as drafted, let's say, they would have to apply and seek that approval. They would not, under their current regional plan sign program, begin to immediately display off-premise product advertising.
They could not, or will not.
So they under the let me just clarify. So if this ordinance were approved and went into effect tomorrow, let's say, a site like the Discovery Science Center would not immediately begin to be able to display off-premise product advertising. They couldn't just put up a bunch of billboards or convert their signs to billboards because they still have to go through an application process with the city.
Right, but the other discussion was that because they're sort of like considered themselves to be the county, a county exhibit, a county museum, so they happen to do something that, well, for instance, they recently had signage on there for Starbridge Nursing School. You know, if that's not in the immediate area, how would that be treated under this particular new ordinance?
Chair, this is Min. So the banner that you talked about on the cube, they were notified to take that down because it did not meet the on-site signage in terms of their existing regional sign plan. They can only advertise on-site activities and on-site information. This,
But in all due respect, Min, that was a revenue maker for them, and we took that
Right.
away.
well, the thing is that they didn't have permission to do that. Under this current ordinance, they will be able to apply for that.
They will be able to apply.
Sorry, this proposed ordinance, if approved, they will be eligible, as a business to apply. Correct.
And if I remember correctly, in the discussion we had with that, there was also by chance if they could afford to do it, they were going to go and try to put up some digital signage versus the manual canvas signs that they put up on the building today.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Going back to the time of use and everything else, from the standpoint of off-site advertising. So if Main Place Mall decides to advertise about something that's going on downtown Santa Ana, is there going to be some limit to that, or is that just going to be an unlimited situation above and beyond what was considered to be the PSA expectation of, say, up to 6 minutes an hour?
So under the draft ordinance, site like, let's say, Main Place that would propose a conversion from on-premise digital advertising to off-premise digital advertising would have a minimum amount specified through conditions of approval for advertising public service announcements, community events, things like that. And then would also, staff would propose a minimum condition of approval requiring a minimum amount of display of products sold at Main Place's site, and therefore an implied cap on the amount of advertising for off-premise products.
So I'm going to go back to what Norma was asking earlier on and talk about the revenue generation. How is this revenue formula established? Is it a tax on advertising? Is the fees that are charged by the third-party group happen to be $50,000? Is the city going to say, well, you have a 10% tax on that, or how is that going to be established?
So there's a variety of avenues that one can take or a city can take in these situations. You can do a combination or exclusive sort of situation where you specify a minimum just annual amount per face of billboard, or you can specify a minimum amount per face unless an amount exceeds a certain amount, and then charge a percent of the revenues or a percent of the proceeds from selling the advertising time on the billboard. And those can be gathered through operating fees or development agreements or through establishment of a new tax. Those are the different avenues that one can take. The current proposal is to pursue operating fees, as I was describing earlier.
So suffice to say, you don't have a formula yet.
No, the formula and the terms of all that are still in the development phases.
Okay. All right. So,
Chair,
yes, go ahead.
this is Cynthia. I feel like we've been
Go ahead,
here
Cynthia.
before. Things get brought to us in a study session, but does that mean you're going to come and present to us one more time before we get to take a vote? Because we're not getting all of the information. Respectfully, you guys are still trying to figure out what might work best for our city, how best to create the revenue. What I'm hearing is this is a potential and a really good idea for that, but there's not a concrete plan yet. So it's just kind of an introduction of the project to us.
Well, Vice Chair, this is Min. The intent here is to have the information in a study session so we can get feedback. We are finalizing the draft ordinance based on your feedback, and we will present and circulate that information to the Planning Commission as well as the general public, all before it is proposed in July, where we will come back with a staff report and a set of concrete recommendations to you based on what we hear today. So our goal is to have a concrete ordinance that you will have time to review, and we will provide you with recommendations when we come back in July or August.
So will we be able to do another study session? So that
You can, but you don't necessarily have to. Based on what we hear today, we feel that based on the direction, we will provide a circulated document with incorporating some of the comments in to some of the concepts that we introduced today. We will refine it, and our goal is to be able to present this in adoption format. And as you know, in the past, the Commission is able to review the information and have discussion. And if you need additional clarification, or you feel that there are additional directions you would like to add during the public hearing process, we have the ability to make those and add those clarifications.
and I appreciate that. I just feel like there's little chunks of, Mark, thank goodness he's, been around for a while, so he knows a lot of history. But we've got, other folks on here that don't know that history. So therefore, having that background information to me is key in moving forward, because I feel like I could probably give better feedback. So those are just my thoughts, and moving forward, I think I'd appreciate hearing from the city. These are let's say the 3 different formats that we're planning on creating revenue, and this is how we'd like to do it. Then I think you'd get more concrete feedback from us instead of hearing, well, these are our possibilities, but we're not sure which ones we like.
Understood.
And that's just, I just want to be able to do a good job and have enough information and hear enough information and read it to be able to give that feedback. So those are just my thoughts. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Cynthia. And I'm going to go back and build on what Cynthia just said. I mean, a couple of things here, just some comparisons. Like, if you go down to 55, or you go up to 55 from Newport Beach to Santa Ana, there's the hotels, the 2 motels on the side of the road by Edinger, and they've got a pretty large sign that says what the hotels are and the stores and everything else. And is that considered to be a static sign at this point in time that could be converted to a LED sign?
No, so the conversion is for existing LED or digital sign to a digital billboard. For places where you have things static on site, they would have to go through the process of applying for a new establishment and not necessarily consider a conversion. They still have the opportunity to apply. They can apply, correct.
They can apply. I mean, when this whole ordinance discussion started 2 to 3 years ago, it was, we had the Tom's Truck signs. We didn't have Main Place Mall. We had the Auto Mall, and we also entertained a signage program that was down at the buildings right there at the intersection of the 405 and the 55, which I don't remember the name of that complex, but it's right there below MacArthur. And that was basically the only signage we had. So that's one thing. The other question I have is, one of the things that Ali mentioned in this conversation was that this was going to give the city an opportunity to get some of the internal signs removed. Can you give us an example of what those internal signs, what is one of those internal signs that we're talking about?
Thanks, Chairman. So as drafted, the ordinance would essentially require that if an existing company that runs a static billboard along the freeway wants to convert or reconstruct that structure into a digital sign, then they would be required to remove inner city billboards along our arterials and secondary roadways. So for example, I believe there's a very large double-sided billboard, for example, at the intersection of Fairview and Edinger. That would be a typical sort of inner city billboard that a billboard company could identify for their application to the city to say, well, I propose removing this plus XYZ other locations in exchange for converting and reconstructing this billboard along the 55 to digital technology. And that would satisfy one of the purposes of this endeavor in updating the ordinance to remove these billboards from the center of Santa Ana and shift them toward the freeways.
So I guess let me ask this a straight question to say, is the goal to eliminate billboards inside the city of Santa Ana, not along the 55 and 5?
So one of the purposes for this endeavor is to help remove billboards from within the city. I
mean, a perfect example I can think of is the billboard that sits on top of Mix Mix, which is on 3rd and Main Street. There's a billboard there. Now, the owner of that building gets revenue, significant revenue, off of that billboard. And are we saying that our plan is to eventually phase out that billboard?
The plan would not, or the ordinance, let's say, as drafted, would not result in the city going after those billboards, let's say. It would give the applicants, the billboard companies, the opportunity to say, you know what, we're going to identify this billboard and that billboard and a handful of others, let's say, as part of our application to remove. So it would be applicant driven, not city driven.
But help me understand what would motivate me as an applicant to do that. I got 4 signs in the city that are all scattered throughout the city. One's at Fairview and Edinger, one's at 3rd and Main Street. I want to put a couple of billboards. Oh, there's billboards along the 55. Today there's static billboards along the 55. So I want to make those into LED billboards. And the city's going to come back and say, well, we'll trade you 2 billboards in the city for 1 billboard on the 55. Is that what we're saying?
I wouldn't necessarily describe it as will trade you because these aren't city-owned billboards. But to your original,
but you're telling them, that they have to get rid of the billboards internally in order to get authorized to do one on the 55.
Correct.
So, Chairman, the idea of the ordinance is to allow for establishment of digital off-site through several avenues. One is through conversion of existing digital on-premise signs that are located and associated with existing retail business of regional nature in the city. 2 is to allow for establishment of new billboards in exchange along the freeway corridor in exchange for removal of existing billboards in the interior of the city. The idea is that the digital billboard will provide the incentive for an applicant. Let's say if it's a billboard company and they have multiple billboards in the city, they can say for this billboard we would propose to remove these following billboards within the city, or for us to be able to establish this new digital billboard. So that would be the incentive. And the other avenue of establishing a billboard in the city, that would be based on economic community benefits, is that it has to be associated with a tax revenue generating business on site, and that location is a part of the advertising of the billboard, so that it provides for stimulating not only the business on the property, but it also allows for an opportunity for the city to be a part of the commercial aspect of that billboard. So free way and to get to the point where you ask what incentivizes is that the incentivization is through the replacement and removal of certain billboards within the city interior. The company has the total control of what they propose to the city. We're not, by this ordinance, telling them, oh, you need to remove this billboard, that billboard, and then consider it. So this is a applicant-based process for private off-site. Does that help?
Not really. I mean, to be honest, it doesn't help me at all because, what I'm looking at is just practical side of it. I got a billboard that's, again, 3rd and Main. I'm going to use it. It's Coors billboard. Okay. For me as an owner of that billboard, all I have to do is spend maybe $5,000 to put in just take a big piece of vinyl and put it on top of that billboard. $5,000, maybe. I think that's a lot more money than it really is. Versus, I want to install a digital billboard on the 55. I think Tom's Trucks, spent close to $1 million on their digital billboard, and I think that Main Place Mall, spent about $1.5 million or $2 million on that. Tom's Trucks is managed by Tom's Trucks. Main Place Mall is managed by a third party. So I don't see how there's an incentive to a billboard company to take down the billboard internally when they want to put a billboard in lieu of putting a billboard on the 55.
Can I
Yeah, go ahead.
ask a follow-up question, Mark? Sorry, this is Norma.
Is it Norma? Yeah, okay,
yeah,
Norma, jump in.
Thanks. Sorry. How many inner city billboards do we have currently?
Thank you.
Commissioner Garcia, there are over 100 static billboards along the city's roadways.
And of those 100, how many are owned by the same? I mean, how many are owned by the same billboard company? Do you have a sense of whether they're all owned by 3, billboard companies, or is there a larger number of owners?
Our inventory shows that about 4 or 5 different companies own the majority of those billboards.
And okay, so and this is, I think, goes back to my question of how many billboards are we really going to see along these corridors? Because I think I understand when you say at most you're going to have 10 to 15 new digital billboards under the proposed ordinance. But the static billboards will remain, right? So there isn't necessarily a sense that those would be converted into these digital billboards. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. The draft ordinance would not allow the inner city billboards to convert to digital.
No, I'm talking about the static billboards currently along the freeways. The same corridors. So those, because, and I guess I'll just step back and say, we're talking about 100 inner city billboards, and you're only going to put up 10 to 15 new digital billboards along the identified corridors. We're really talking about you're going to make a small dent, again nonetheless, a small dent in the existing inventory of inner city billboards. Correct?
I would say that it's up to the city to draft and adopt an ordinance and specify the number that would have to be taken down or removed in exchange for the ability to put up or convert one along the freeway to digital. So whether that number is, let's say, 2 to 1, then you're correct. The majority would remain in the city. If the number ends up being, let's say, like 8 to 1, then you would see a significant, removal of these inner city billboards.
And the sense behind that is that it is obviously going, or the thought would be that it's going to be more lucrative for these billboard companies to be along the freeway corridor with a greater audience than if they stay within the city limits, which makes sense. Right? That's the thinking behind that. And
correct. The value of a two-sided digital billboard along a freeway like the 55 or the 5, which has like an average daily traffic of 400,000 vehicles, is much higher than the value and the advertising revenue that an inner city billboard generates. So that's part of the force behind it.
So then I think there's two follow-ups that I would, appreciate some feedback on, because I think, Ali, your point to say, if the ordinance is drafted so that it's, 8 to 1, I think that makes sense, because the goal is really to diminish the number of inner city billboards, which makes sense. And so, I recommend that we really look at maximizing those numbers. But the flip side of that is, if a billboard company has a business of billboards, and they can afford to just apply for a digitized new one along the freeway, then why wouldn't they do that in addition to the economic benefits that are being requested, and not touch the billboards within the city, which I think was Mark's point. What other kind of incentive are we looking to provide? So they're saying, no, we prefer to give up and can we do that? We prefer to give up the inner city billboards for the freeway digitized billboards. What in this conversation would be helpful to understand what the city can do to motivate that instead of the economic benefits? Or do we want the economic benefits in the other? What is the ultimate goal?
I think that's a...
So,
Go ahead, Vin.
so I think you discussed a couple of points that is looking at the goal of this process is to really incentivize the billboard companies to consider removing some of the existing billboards in the city. The conversion that you have are very limited in terms of situations. Either you convert an existing billboard that's already existing today, that's along the freeway, or it has to establish a conversion of existing on-site or new billboards without an exchange. It has to be associated with an existing business today. And it's not an establishment of purely a billboard. So through that process, they would have to be proposed along with an existing business today or a business in the city that is associate retail. And it has to also include an advertisement of the on-site activity. So there's some strings that can be attached to conversion of existing digital on-site or establishing new billboards without having to do the exchange. But the goal is that you have...
Let me ask you the question, Ali, you said, 100 billboards internal of the city. To me, what I see on those billboards is Coors Beer, Budweiser, or I see marketing. They're marketing a national brand of some sort. They're not putting the billboards aren't being put up there to say, hey, come to the meeting that's going to be held on Thursday, at 6 p.m. at the Delhi Center. That doesn't exist on the billboard signs in the city. Those billboard signs are marketing products that are probably national, if not international products. And yet we're talking about putting, if we get rid of those signs in the city and we go to the billboard, an electronic billboard on the 55, we're going to advertise something that's internal to the city that, they wouldn't get that visibility for. I don't see how that plays into this discussion at all. Crickets.
I'm trying to process your question, because the information, what we're asking for through the operating agreement is to have the city public messaging be a part of that advertising when, based on what we would agree to in operating agreement, such as a portion of time or at the city's request. And that would be the public messaging that can be displayed all the time. that's where the digital format has a very superior process over the static billboard. The content can be changed remotely as you can see, and it can be done instantaneously.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I could, a stretch of the imagination is something of that nature already exists in the static mode along the 55. Because if you go past the moving company, they've got all their moving trucks out there. One of them advertises an event. One of them advertises, a glass, a furniture store, and go on down. You got 6 or 7 trucks that are all lined up, and they're advertising all these different, opportunities. It's poor man's digital screen, but it's still happening. What are we doing about controlling that situation?
So the ordinance does not have an amortization of existing billboards along the freeway.
These are not billboards, men. These are trucks with billboard signs on the side of the truck.
There are not permitted signs in the city. We don't permit. If it's not a billboard, well, we don't permit billboards, but those signs are not permitted by the city.
We see them all.
And why? But we see them all the time on the 55.
So I think to be very frank, they found a loophole in our code that basically put their vehicles on a truck, and it's we don't regulate signage or information on a mobile platform. If, that is the my understanding of how they were able to do that without violating the city's sign ordinance.
Well,
Yes, there was a matter with the Caltrans on that as well, and they're supposed to only have 2 now. That was their settlement with Caltrans, and so if they're not abiding by that, we can certainly get in touch with Caltrans.
Okay, so Caltrans is the one that's in control of that?
On the
Not the
freeway,
city of
on
San
the
Ana.
freeway for the freeway frontage, they had a regulation regarding those
Got it.
stationary vehicle signs. Yes.
Got it.
Thank
So
you.
it's a freeway. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right. Are we trying to
Sharon?
close that loophole? Yes, go ahead.
Oh, well, first,
Norma?
maybe you can answer that question first. This is Ty, but maybe answer your question
Hi.
first.
That's okay. Go, Ty.
Okay, so just circling back to these stationary billboards, a couple questions. First is on slides 14 and 15, I know we're still trying to figure out the exchange ratio for removing non-conforming billboards, but this economic and community benefits situation, it doesn't seem clear to me that, well, first, who determines what the economic and community benefits are, and 2, what's our bar, what's our standard? Because, for example, let's say they check the box for local and significant employment. Is that 5%? Is that 50%? Is that 90%? What are we looking at?
So our goal is to provide the planning commission with the metrics when we do come back, and a method for determining the appropriate ask and the level of ask. The goal of tonight's introduction to you is to be able to get the commission's feedback as to are we heading in the right direction so that we can finalize the formula. The intent is that through the operating agreement, we will be able to implement these asks as part of a guidance and a set of guidelines that will be adopted via resolution, so that the ordinance sets the enabling authority to establish these asks and require the operating agreement. And through the operating agreement, we're able to have flexibility based on guidance adopted through the resolution with metrics for determining what is the right exchange rate. The exchange rate gets, it could be based on square footage, as Ali mentioned, or it could be based on the location of the billboard and the number of the billboards. So those are the things that we're continuing to refine. But the goal is to be able to have those criteria be put into place and get the planning commission's recommendation on those.
Okay. My other question is regarding, I guess it kind of goes to what the chair and vice chair mentioned regarding some of these billboards advertising, say, Coca-Cola. Right? The question is always, okay, if a liquor store sells Coca-Cola, is that, say, on-site or off-site? Or if Coca-Cola doesn't have headquarters at the mall, is that on-site or off-site, but they have a vending machine? And I would like to see us have some standards regarding what is specifically considered on-site and have some measures that, vendors can tick off, because it's pretty easy to find loopholes around what is and is not considered on-site. We're really specifically trying to ensure that Santa Ana businesses are getting this benefit, that, we have that squared away when we bring back the ordinance and the metrics. My other concern, and I hate to be negative Nancy here, but when you do bring back the staff report for the ordinance, I would like to see some evidence, or maybe this happened last time, of, evidence and research regarding the safety of these billboards. Obviously, we know the 5 is incredibly trafficky and congested. I do understand that it's really important to try to bring in economic development in the city, but I recall the Citadel, the outlet on the fly, kind of near Commerce, when they put in their digital billboards, and it's quite incredible how distracting those can be, because you're essentially watching TV as you're driving. And I find that it's actually a little bit more dangerous when you're in kind of tight traffic, because you have to pay attention to stopping more. That's where you get all the, fender vendors. And so I'd like to see some evidence that, it's not going to increase, driver distraction and kind of car accidents on these freeways, because especially if they're, these billboards are closer to on-ramps or off-ramps, that's going to be closer to communities, even if it's 300 feet away. But I just want to make sure that we look into that issue.
Thank you. All right. Norma, do you have any other questions of staff?
I do. Thank you, Mark. Is there, have you guys looked into or considered services consultants about whether or not the 45 billboard companies that are already established in the inner parts of the city have either in the past in other cities made this kind of exchange for a digitized freeway billboard, or whether or not this is something that would be welcome. I mean, I ask because I really question whether it's something these billboard companies would be willing to do, and I just don't know.
So from my past knowledge of working with billboards company, they are very much interested in being able to establish the new technology along the freeway. I think the ratio of where the ratio makes sense really depends on the revenue that they, achieve with static billboards in the inner city and what they can achieve with corridor. As I mentioned, each location in terms along the freeway could have its unique revenue potential from a variety of factors in terms of visibility, in terms of the traffic volume, and that's where we're trying to work to refine and have a ratio that would make sense and it would be enough of an incentive to for companies that are not qualified to the two other way of establishing billboard through conversion is to get this exchange rate to a number that would make sense for both the city and the billboard companies.
I would just add that I think it's going to be really important to ensure when you come back to this commission that you've really considered this and that you have identified, or that there is a way to prioritize the companies who are willing to give up, billboards in the city over just new billboards, new digitized billboards. Because I think, to Cynthia's earlier point as to whether we want to cheapen our city, I've seen these digital billboards in Mexico City, and I think you have them in Vegas, but we're not Mexico City, we're not, huge metropolis. So if not done right, I think it could be it'll be hard to see as we drive through, the city or along our freeways. And so I would really urge you to consider how realistic that plan is, or whether by doing this, yes, it's going to bring more revenue to the city, but at what cost? Creating an eyesore. We're just going to have the existing, static billboards plus the trailers with the side, free billboards, so to speak, and these digital billboards. I think that's going to be really important. I would like to see an analysis of what the conversion realistically would look like. Looking at the revenues, I think, looking at your highest number of, I think it's like about $3 million, I think it's positive. But there's a balance to that, and I would urge you to consider these issues when you present to us next. I would also add that I completely agree with Mark on the 300 feet on the residential areas. I think it's nothing really. So to the extent you can increase that along, neighborhoods, I think that's ideal. And trying to keep our communities, I think, happy with the development within the city. And I think that is all for now. I had a lot of questions, so thank you for entertaining all of them.
Thank you, Norma. Anybody else have any other questions? Hearing none, I'm gonna bring up a couple. One of the things that I think I might suggest is that if we're going to do this, it might be helpful to reach out to, and again, I'm going to go to Morrison Park and Park Santiago and some of the other parks that are around the 55 in that area, the 5 and the 55, 5 and 22, with regards to Main Place Mall's signage, because there was a lot of feedback and a lot of issues that were brought up after the fact. And one of the things that we did have as a problem when we went out and we were reviewing the whole process with the Main Place Mall, none of the neighborhoods were really contacted because they were beyond 1,000 feet. So I think we really have to make sure we reach out to the communities that are close to some of these signs today and get some feedback on this. Also, somebody mentioned a map of the signs, and I think, I would say that, in a very gross situation, Allie and Jerry have, circled an area that potentially could be subject to having a electronic billboard. I think it would be good to see what do we have as existing billboards today, and then if there's any way of taking that circle and kind of breaking it down to say, within this circle, this following areas would likely or potentially could be used for signage, and there's going to be areas within that circle that just it'll never happen. Can we break that down a little bit to get a little more granular detail so we understand, if you show us that there's 16 different areas that they could put up signs, then that's potentially going to be above and beyond what we just talked about as far as the number of signs that are going to be that we can do. Does that make sense?
Chairman, absolutely. And the draft mitigated negative declaration that's been drafted for this endeavor actually does specifically show properties that would be potentially affected by the ordinance in terms of allowing conversions or construction of new facilities. So when we continue to engage the commission and notify the commission of the availability of the MND and its posting online with the draft ordinance, those graphics, those illustrations will be available as well.
When do you think that's going to be available?
Soon. We are aiming to wrap up the we are aiming to wrap up the edits to the mitigated negative declaration in the next few weeks and get it online.
So are we talking about the first week of July? Are we talking about the second week of July? I mean,
What you'll have here is that you'll get the ordinance draft in draft form at least 20 days before the meeting. Our goal is to get it to you ASAP, but at the minimum 20 days before the meeting.
is there any expected or required review period for this draft?
Chairman,
Not for the draft, except for the CEQA requirement, which is the time to review as a mitigated net deck as a public circulation.
So what time frame would that be?
Is that 20 or 30 days, Ali? Can you verify?
it'll be 30 days.
30 days. So you'll get it 30 days before the meeting.
So it's 30 days before the meeting. So just erring on the side of conservativeness, we would sit there and say that we probably wouldn't see this until late August, in front of the Planning Commission as a final document.
Our goal is to take it to you in July, August, correct? Late July or early August.
Okay, the numbers aren't quite matching up, but we'll see how it comes out. Okay. Anybody else at this time have any other questions of staff? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. And at this point in time, I'll just ask, is there any questions or any items that staff would like to comment on at this point in time?
Chair.
I just want to share an update. Chair, I just want to share an update regarding we had a meeting on June 11th with the Planning Commission representative, Historic Resource Commission representative, and members of Preserve Orange County, Center for Historic Preservation, city staff, Toll Brothers, to discuss the finding in the report regarding the First American Toll Brother project and the preservation effort relating to the facades behind the existing cladding for the First American building. Participated in that meeting from the commission include yourself, Chair, Commissioner Pan, and Commissioner Garcia. The purpose of that meeting is to, number one, review the status of the report, that whether or not the facade can be preserved, and unequivocally, it was determined that based on what we saw, what's in the report, it to be that preservation is something that will need to be incorporated into that project. So that meeting, we were able to gain consensus on the preservation. The next step for us is to work with the development project team on the preservation, restoration, and integration of the facade into the new project. As part of that, they will be required to address restoration and integration, as well as what is going to need to be done during the demolition process to ensure that the facade will be protected, and we will provide the commission as well as the stakeholders that potentially have meeting with an update prior to issuing a demolition permit to project development team. So that information will be provided, and I thank you for your participation in that.
Thank you, Min. Appreciate that. It was a very good session, and it showed that everybody could, if they work collaboratively, we can come up with solutions to things of that nature. And it was well managed as far as the meeting goes. Any other staff comments at this point?
Chair McLaughlin?
Okay.
Chair McLaughlin?
Yes.
If we could just, as a process, can we just ask if there is anyone that would like to comment on the work study session, please?
Public comment?
Yes, a public comment, since it is an agenda item, if we can just call, just to see if there is anyone that would like to make a comment. So if you are,
Okay, so at this point in time, if anybody would like to make a public comment with respect to our work study for this evening, please call in.
Yes, if you are participating by conference call and wish to speak on the work study session, please press *9 now. I'll wait a couple seconds. We do not have anyone who's indicated they'd like to speak, and we'll conclude the public comments for that item.
Okay, thank you, Madam Secretary. I appreciate you bringing that up. Again, we'll move on to Commissioner comments. Commissioner Garcia.
You've heard enough for me tonight. I'm done. Thank you.
Commissioner Nguyen.
No comment, thank you.
Commissioner Tai-Fan.
Just general comments, right? Do we move past staff comments?
You can comment on anything you want to comment on.
Well, first, I just wanted to thank staff for having this study session. It was really helpful with our seasoned commissioners giving a lot of that background. I also wanted to just wish everyone a happy 4th of July, since I won't see you before then. And just stay safe out there with all these fireworks and everything. Take care of your pets, and have a great week.
Thank you, Commissioner Tai-Fan. Commissioner Rivera.
Sorry, no comments. No comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Vice Chair Contreras-Leo.
I just want to thank staff for their time and hope that everyone who is a dad had a great Father's Day.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Okay, well, other than the fact that I was called seasoned, which I think is a similar term for old, from Ty, I'll take that as a compliment. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
You're classic, Mark. You're classic.
There you go, classic. All right, that's good. I appreciate that.
And classics have a lot of value, Mark. Yes, it does.
There you go. I'd just like to thank staff for putting this together. I know this has been something that's been on the table for several years now. I'm not sure, I'm not sure the outcome of this at this point in time. That's why the economics of the questions that I think Commissioner Garcia and others were asking about the economics, it needs to be understood. Reiterating what has also been said, we have 4th of July coming up, and I hope everybody has a safe 4th of July. And our next meeting will be held on the 13th. The 12th or the 13th of July?
13th.
13th of July. I do have one question. my understanding is the council has gone back to council chambers. There's no public in there, but they've gone back to council chambers. Are we considering to do the same thing for the July 13th meeting, or are we going to continue to do it as a Zoom virtual off-site meeting?
Chair, that is, I'm working that through with the city clerk's office. Our goal is to evaluate how the city council and follow the city council's protocol. But after we have had a chance to kind of work through the kinks of that process, so for the time being, we're recommending that we stay in the Zoom meeting format until the council has been able to fully reintegrate with that process. And that may be in August sometimes or September. And I understand the intent is to not necessarily have the public be, at least in the first place, be inside the council chambers, but rather only allow people to come in and speak when they want to speak on an item or make public comments. So we will continue to evaluate that. Obviously, the council has a significant more number of people that participate, and our goal is to be able to take experience away from that before we move away from this process.
Okay, I just know that they've had several meetings already under the format of having the council in the council chambers and no one else per se other than staff. So I'm just trying to figure out what our expectations are. So you're looking at something that's August and September, which would be right around the same time we'll be reviewing this ordinance again.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. All right. Having said that, I'll call meeting is adjourned, and I appreciate everybody's participation, and thank you, and have a safe evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah.